Greetings with lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks. And today is a very special day. I know I say that a lot, but this interview is something else. I am so excited to introduce my guest. My guest today is the one, the only Newbery honoree, middle grade author of the Three Times Lucky series, Island of Spies, which is their newest book, and so much more. I am so pleased and, honored to welcome the Newbery honoree, Sheila Tarnage.
Thank you very much. I am so excited to be here. I'm so honored to be with you. And I cannot wait to get started.
I can't wait either. And from the moment you said that you'd like to be on my podcast, I jumped out of my chair and I was like, what? Because I love Three Times Lucky, and after reading Island of Spies, I love that just as much, if not even more. And I see you got the poster right behind you.
Yeah, I do. It's got a great cover. It's got an exciting cover. And thank you for saying you like both books. I do too. I loved Mowendale and Three Times Lucky and in that series. And now I've shifted gear a little bit going into historical fiction. And I love these kids too. So thanks for saying that. Thank you for your enthusiasm.
Well, this is something that you said. You said that you shifted gears, and you most certainly did, going from kind of contemporary middle grade mystery fiction to, historical fiction. Island of Spies is set at Hatteras Island with the dime novel kids, and I'm just so interested to know what compelled you to kind of move from contemporary to historical fiction and on a very famous place like Hatteras Island.
Yeah, Hatteras Island is a super famous place. People go there today to vacation. And of course, they have a wonderful national seashore there. In 1942, when this book is set, the island was really remote. There were no bridges connecting the island to the mainland. So you could come across on a boat or you could be born there. And that's just about the only two ways to get to Hatteras Island. I decided I wanted to make the shift into historical fiction because Hatteras has such a spectacular World War II history, and it is a history very few people know anything about. And so I really wanted the people of Hatteras Island to have the credit for living through that era and for experiencing all of those things. So that was one thing that really made me want to write this book. Not many people know this, but in World War II, everybody knows the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Okay, that's in the West. Everybody was looking in the West in America going, oh, what's going to happen to us next? Well, while everybody was looking to the West, Japan's ally, Nazi Germany, attacked from the East. They sent their U-boats to the coast, to the East Coast, because of the very important trade lanes, ships, and they started sinking ships. Hatteras Island was the best hunting for those U-boats because of the way the currents interact there. The waters are so famously dangerous. That's the graveyard of the Atlantic. And so in this book, based on the true history of Hatteras, the novel kids, Stick Lawson, an artist named Rain, and a Boy Scout named Neb, come together to try to solve a great mystery of that time, with all of these ships going down, with these U-boats secretly offshore because the government classified the information. They didn't want people on the mainland to panic. They were on their own. And there were rumors of spies going up and down the coast, spies being put ashore from these U-boats. And so the dime novel kids take on this huge mystery as people come onto the island. Who are the spies? Who are not the spies? Who's dangerous? Who's safe? And what can we do? What can three kids do to keep their home and the people they love safe in such a dangerous situation. So I love history. I love mystery. This book has both of them interwoven, and it was a joy to write.
This whole story of Three Times Lucky, the three books that you have in it, they were such a treat to read. And
Oh, thank you.
And you actually wrote them in Tupelo Landing, which is where you live. So, can you share why you decided to write your book in, I guess, a place that you know and love so well? And also, what were there any challenges and what's kind of different? Because Tupelo Landing is loosely based on where you live. What are the differences?
Well, there are differences between Tupelo Landing and the place that I actually live. But what I tried to do was capture the flavor of where I live, the tempo of where I live, the humor of where I live. You know, humor always has a certain rhythm and a certain grace. And so there are many components of where I live in Tupelo Landing. I live in eastern North Carolina, just outside a really small town like Tupelo Landing. All of the scenery and the way the rivers move and the way the earth is shaped here that you read in Three Times Lucky and in the other Mowendale Mysteries, those are all accurate replicas of where I live. Writing about a place that you live in offers a lot of advantages. And they have to do with detail in particular. You know, when you're writing a book, so much detail goes into everything. Of course, it goes into the description. That's what makes the description pop to life is like a certain detail about a certain building or a certain place. But what details should it be? Details are also critical because detail, the description, controls the flow of dialogue. Not many people think about that, but that's a wonderful way to control the flow of dialogue. And so, for instance, if I was in my office, I live way out in town in an old house, and if I was upstairs working on my book in my office, and suddenly I needed a really specific detail, all I had to do was go outside and look and see, for instance, the way a trumpet vine climbs up the wall of a barn. And I could just write that down and bring it and put it into place. So that's a great advantage of writing about where you live. With the Island of Spies, on the other hand, Hatteras Island is probably 3 hours from my house, and I love to visit. I go every chance I can get because who wouldn't?
Yeah.
But you know, so when I would go to Hatteras Island, I would collect details often. I just walk around taking photographs and also writing out details that I could use later in the book.
Have you always wanted to be a published author, or did this kind of dream develop when you were older?
You know what? I realized that I was an author when I was in first grade.
Wow.
I know it sounds hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. I was in first grade, and already I loved to read. I just loved books. And, you know, we would have our little reading groups and stuff. And I just thought, man, this is the best thing ever. So it was a really important day. I was in first grade. And there was a super important historical event. And that was that first American was going to blast into space. That's how old I am. First American blasting into space. So one of the parents brought a new invention called a portable television into our classroom and set it up for us. And we all watched this event unfold. And then my teacher went up to the board and she raised a map up. It was a map on rollers. She raised it up, and there were all of these vocabulary words on the board. And she said, write a story. It was the first story I'd ever written. I had that weird paper that they use in first grade, that tan paper with the light blue lines on it. It had a fat pencil. It had the vocabulary words up on the board. And I wrote my first story about that historic event. I wrote it and I filled up my paper and I put my pencil down. And she came around and she looked at it and she read it. And, she could have said, oh, you made all of your K's backwards or all of your S's. She could have said a lot of things, but here is exactly what she said to me. She said, this is an excellent story and you are an excellent writer. And those words went all the way into me. And then she took me by the hand. She said, come on, I want you to read to third graders. Third graders. I was terrified of third graders because they were so big. But I went in there, I stood up in front of third graders and I read my story. And I remember looking out and thinking, this is working. These people are listening to me. They're experiencing what I experienced because of my story. And when I turned around and walked back to first grade with my teacher, I remember thinking, this is it for me. I'm a writer. This is what I am. This is what I do. So I have thought of myself as a writer from then on. And it's because of the words of that one teacher. She changed the projection of my life in that moment.
Well, that's just another reason why teachers are the best, and they really change our lives, and that's not an exaggeration, especially from your story. And I can't imagine being in first grade and hearing those words from a teacher. They would have just made me smile from ear to ear. And to think that those two sentences inspired your whole career in the future, just amazing to think about. And those aha moments, usually I hear from people who it took me years and years, but those aha moments are some of the most amazing and interesting to hear.
It was so important in my life, and I have worked consistently gaining skill as I went along and gaining experience, but that was the beginning. That was the impetus. And that gave me the confidence and the heart to keep going. So, I owe my first grade teacher, her name was Agnes Full-of-Love. And I owe her a lot. And I actually got to call her one time and thank her for that moment.
So your protagonists are the dime novel kids, Rain, Stick,
right.
and Nev. So they were inspired to go on their detective work from the dime novel books. And they even wrote a letter to the FBI, who haven't yet responded, but I'm sure they will.
Right.
And I'm curious, were the dime novels, were they inspired by one of your favorite childhood book series?
The dime novels are an interesting thing. Dime novels were real books.
Oh.
They were popular from the late 1800s through the early 1900s and into the 40s. And there were these inexpensive little paperbacks that you could buy for a dime. They were called dime novels. They cost a dime. You get them, you read them. They were not fabulous literature. Let's say that. They were written for entertainment. They were detective stories. They were romances. But people ate them up. And our heroes, Stick, Neb, and Rain, they can get them at the store there on the island. And so they have them and they read them. This is how they learn about detective work. This is how they learn about what it's like on the mainland, because the mainland was so different from the islands in the 40s. The mainland had developed, they had electricity everywhere, not on the islands. So it was really like reading about a different world for the dime novel kids. And so they patterned their business on these dime novels. And that's why they call themselves the dime novel kids.
That is so
Most of the most of the information that they would have, that the dime novel kids would have, might come over the radio. They didn't have television. They would have movies down in one village on the island that they could go to if they could afford it. But there just wasn't that flow of information. So that's why the dime novels were so important to them.
And my next question for you is, on your website, you shared that you have always been surrounded by stories. Your family always told stories. And I'm curious to know if any of the stories that you heard as a kid kind of inspired characters in the future in your Island of Spies Three Times Lucky series.
Mm-hmm. You know, I am so lucky because I did grow up surrounded by storytellers, and they were wonderful storytellers. I'm quite a bit older than you are, I could venture to say. And so when I was a child, um, especially before we had air conditioning here in North Carolina, which it is hot here in North Carolina in the summer, people would sit out on their porches, and usually in the dark, but you don't want to attract the mosquitoes. So people would sit outside and tell stories to amuse each other and entertain each other. And I was a little girl, and I would sit and I would listen to my aunts and uncles and my grandparents and my parents tell these stories. Some of the stories do stick with me, the detail of the story or the excitement of the story, like my great aunt Seba riding her pony across a raging hurricane stream as a building collapsed behind her. You know, I remember that. That's vivid in my imagination. But really, the important thing that I got from that experience is listening to the flow of those stories and listening to the structure, listening to the way the humor unfolded, and just listening to the grace of those stories. That all just, I was steeped in that. It just sank into my soul. And it was a wonderful, wonderful gift to me. And it is a gift that I can share now with my readers, because that's the rhythm of the things that I write and the unfolding of the things that I write. So it wasn't so much the detail and the excitement, although those were there. It was really the heart of the stories.
Are you currently working on any middle grade YA or picture books or any kind of books for readers?
Mm-hmm. I am always working on something because I love to do it. And so I'm working on 3 projects right now, and one is for middle grade. I have just started with this book. And so I'm batting ideas around with my editors. I know it's set in North Carolina because I love to write about a place that I know and a place that I love. It is centered around a library. And I don't really want to tell you any more than that. And I'll tell you why. It's because I'm not sure of it yet. Everything is developing. I'm writing character sketches. I'm eavesdropping. That's one of the ways that I write, is I listen for characters in my imagination. I listen for their voices. And then when I start to hear them in my imagination, I start eavesdropping on them. And I start writing down little snatches of dialogue and little bits of this and little bits of that. And then eventually it congeals into a story. So I'll keep you posted, and I promise you this, when it does become a book, you'll be the first one to know.
Was there someone who inspired you to become a writer? Was it your teacher from first grade? Or was it the stories that you were always surrounded by, or something else?
I think all of those things contributed. I remember after I wrote that first story in first grade, I came home to my parents and I said, "Good news. You don't have to worry about what I'm going to be anymore. I'm going to be a writer." And they both said, "Well, that's great. You can do that. You can be a writer." I always had their support. And And I have been lucky because my teachers all the way through school supported me in that too and would encourage me in that. Because I had kind of a knack for it, I had a talent for it, and they could see that and they could see how fulfilling it was for me, I think. And so I received encouragement all the way through. Today, um, lots of my encouragement actually comes from my readers who email me and say, "Oh, I like this book. Will you write another one? Or what are you working on? Can you do another book?" And so of course that's very exciting to an author to know that her readers appreciate her work. So I would say they're great encouragers at this point.
Well, that readers are always the best. And while I'm not an author, I'm a reader, and and I think that we're pretty cool. And
Yeah,
I
I think you are too.
thank you. And it's so great to have parents that support you along every step of your journey, and teachers as well, because they're the people that really they teach you everything about life. And they really, if you don't have a supportive teacher, like who knows what might happen? Maybe your entire life would shift somewhere else and you might become
Yeah.
an engineer or maybe
Mhm.
well, there's so many other jobs out there. Maybe you might become a banker instead of maybe becoming a
Yeah.
storyteller like you
Well,
always wanted.
that's right. That's right. And my parents were not writers. My father was an engineer. He
Oh,
was a civil engineer, and my mother was a teacher who taught science. She loved science. And in fact, the character of Stick in Island of Spies is based a little bit on my mother's love for science because Stick is a scientist. So they were not writers at all, but they were respectful enough when I said, this is what I'm going to do. This is it. I'm a writer. They had that respect and that love for me to say, yeah.
if you could be or meet any literary character, it could be your favorite author or your favorite character. And of course, I will not judge you at all if you pick one of your own. I probably would if I was a published author. So who would you choose? Who would want to meet, or who would you want to be for a day, and why?
Wow, that is a good question. Um, I think, when I read and also when I write, I read holographically, and I bet you do too.
Mhm.
It's like I step right into the book and I
Yeah.
can see the scenes and I write that way. I step into the scene and I watch and I listen, and that's how I write. And so I feel like in a way I have already met all the characters because I stepped into the book with them and I experienced whatever mystery. Every book is a mystery, and
Yeah.
whatever mystery unfolds in that book, I have already experienced with these people. There are so many authors I would love to meet. Um, Gosh, that would be so exciting. And there's so many characters I feel like I already have met. I think if I were going to meet a character, I think I would like to meet Peter Pan. And I'll tell you the reason. It's because I would like to fly. And so I feel like maybe I could pick up some pointers. Maybe I could gain a little skill in that area from him. But there's so many great characters, and so we're blessed with so many wonderful, wonderful writers.
We
Um,
really
the
are.
list could go on forever. Yeah. What about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like you said, I feel like I'm meeting and really being the characters when I read the books. And I also feel like I'm meeting
Mhm.
the authors in the process, like, because a piece of them always goes into their stories. But if I could
That's
meet one
right.
character, hmm, I think, and I'm not just saying this, I think I would want to meet Stick and work on some of his experiments with him and also go
Hmm.
and all the dime novel kids because their mysteries are so because what's going on in their minds, I really want to keep following. And see where their journey takes them, and maybe they might be a part of the FBI or CIA or detectives in any kind, working on any kind of case in the future. And that's not, I'm not just saying that because you're here. I love the dime novel kids. They're so great.
Oh, well, thank you. I love them too. And I love the way they're so different and they fit together so well. You know, Rain is such a talented artist. She's almost a visionary artist. And stick with her work. People think science isn't imaginative, but science is some of the most imaginative work there is. And then Neb, you know, with his kind of quirky Boy Scoutism, it's so interesting to me how they're so different and how they fit together so well and how their combined strengths propel them forward. Whereas one of them alone maybe wouldn't be able to quite get there, but together they get it done.
And my next question is sadly my final question as well. It's a question I'm asking everybody I interview in January with the new year upon us. What's your New Year's resolution, whether it's writing or something else?
Well, you know, I'm always writing, so I don't really have to resolve to do that.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine how impoverished my life would feel if I were not writing. So I'm always writing. My resolution for this year is simply to have more fun. I think after a pandemic, we all need more fun. And, you know, I know we still have to be careful in the ways that we have to be careful and mindful in the ways we have to be mindful. But I am resolving definitely more fun and more joy moving forward.
I love that. That's my New Year's resolution as well.
Oh, is it? Excellent.
There are so many resolutions, and I feel like this year I want my resolution to not end after February. I want to keep on going. And I think that I just want to have a lot of fun because, like you said, with the pandemic and being stuck inside, you couldn't really do anything. You couldn't see your friends. And now that everything's opening back up, there's so much more fun we can have. And I know I read a lot already, but I always say I want to read even more than the last year. That's my resolution every year. And there's so much great middle grade. And as I'm getting older, I'm also dabbling into younger YA, so there's so many more stories to discover and so many new characters to follow.
I know, it's exciting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And thank you just so much for joining me today, Sheila. It has been an honor, and it's been a lot of fun talking with you. Your books are amazing, and your personality is too. And everybody, let's give Sheila a round of applause. Your answers were very insightful, and it was just a blast to talk with you and learn more about what goes on in the mind of a Newbery honoree who writes such awesome characters that I want to keep on reading about every single day.
Well, thank you. I have loved it. I've loved every minute of this. I love meeting you, and I think you do spectacular work.
Thank you.
And I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, I'm honored you could be a part of my work, and I can't wait for what comes next in the Sheila Turnage middle grade writing world. And to all of you, read these books. They are so good. You're gonna love every single second of them. And also, keep on reading everything. Keep on having fun. And stay safe. And have a great day, everybody. Bye.